questions we wrestle with as Christians about who God is, how do we live out our faith, what is the Bible, what is the truth of the Bible, what are we supposed to believe, how are we supposed to live. There are really big, deep questions that we ask each other, that we ask God, that we wrestle with ourselves. And that's why the Cultivate podcast exists, to help us go deeper in our understanding of who God is, His Word, and the way that He's called us to live. Hey everyone, welcome to the Cultivate podcast with the Grove Church. I'm Charlie Loften, the pastor there, and we have with us...
I don't like saying Abigail Boone.
You just last episode did it, Abigail Boone. And he's like, I think I'm like that. I'm leaning into it.
It sounds less climactic than Big Gale.
No.
All right, we gotta think of a different stage name. Then
I will never accept Big Gale.
Okay. I'll keep thinking of a good one.
Okay, Abigail Boone.
That sounds really serious.
That's right.
Abigail Boone, expert on sin.
Sin expert. She's taken the course. She's learned about it. She's experienced it. She mastered the internship.
I graciously took on the human experience to try it out.
No, I said that actually in the last episode, sin expert, because
we had just talked about it. Yeah.
That you are giving a talk at the women's retreat.
Yes.
Which, based on the time that other people will listen to this, you have given a talk.
That's true.
At the women's retreat on sin
and suffering.
So you've been studying it.
I have.
Therefore,
I'm a sin expert.
I said it kind of tongue in cheek, as if it make it sound like you're an expert in committing sin, but
right.
I was actually referencing
I have
the fact
studied
that you've been studying it.
Yes.
And we spent some time last episode trying to define it a little bit, and spent some really good amount of time really talking about Romans 3:23, falling short of the glory of God.
And what is the glory of God?
Yeah, what the glory of God is, and being worthy to be in His presence. And God is the one that determines what is worthy of being in His presence, and essentially being without sin. If you have any sin at all, you become unworthy of being in His presence. And then we'll go, then what is sin? And then he lists, I cannot imagine anyone to think that the Bible lists everything that is a sin.
Right.
But enough to kind of make sure everybody understands.
Gives you the frame of mind.
Yeah. And to make sure everybody understands, yep, you, yes, yep. Also you, also, yep. And then goes beyond not just bad things that you do, but good things that you should do that you don't. And then also attitudes that you have. Which those three categories could be described, if you want, with three very clever rhyming words.
I got them.
You do?
Commission, omission, disposition.
There you go. Well done. You are this close to being ready to be
a theology expert.
Well, no, a small town church pastor.
Heyo.
With rhyming words.
God is good.
And all the time.
All the time.
God is good.
Amen.
So that's less small town, and that's a little bit more. I feel like that's fancier churches trying to be chill.
That's funny. Okay.
You know what I mean? No matter what size you are.
Right.
No matter what size you are.
Yeah.
We're not really chill enough to kind of
let loose.
But every now and then the pastor will do that, and we'll have like a little all the time. Ooh, look at that. We're just kind of,
crowd's getting into it.
Yeah, we're into it. We're going now. Wow. I'm just not gonna lie. I was just recently on vacation, and I'm just real tired.
Right now.
So you're easy. It's just easy for you to catch. Take me any number
I'll
of
do
places.
some screwdrivers here and there.
That's right. Yeah. So our sin is is anything that makes us unworthy to be in the presence, in the glory of God. And so things that we do, things that we should do that we don't, and just attitudes that we have, things that make us unworthy of the presence of God. And the law, capital L, the rules were given in the Old Testament really to show us what sin is, and to then show us how then we're all unworthy. Too often, people in the Old Testament and even into the New Testament took it as, all right, if I follow all these rules, then I can be good enough.
Right. Not
recognizing it's extensive enough to really get everybody. And so Jesus kind of extended it a little bit. It's like, no. You think if you've just never killed anybody, you're good. But if you've ever wished for their death in your heart.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe you've never had sex with somebody you shouldn't have, but even if you were just like craving them in an unhealthy way, that's this, like, he's really kind of, you've missed the point of all of this. It's not about just what you do. It is about an overall attitude and desires that you have for things that are inappropriate. This was not meant to show you the way to be in the presence of God. It was just simply meant to expose none of us are worthy and we are dependent.
And none of us are capable on our own to overcome
so
this.
then we're just dependent on the grace and mercy of God, which then points us to Jesus, which will be what we talk about post hamartiology, and we move to...
Surely we'll talk about him before.
We've talked about him right now. We talk about him all the time.
It's a little teaser of who's to come.
We will specifically talk about Jesus. He will be the primary topic.
Right.
Where we talk about.
So can I ask a question and you can tell me if it needs to be saved for Q&A?
For sure.
So there's talk of Jesus being, I think the word they use is the culmination of the law.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? Because we've talked about the law being kind of laying out what you should not do and all of that kind of stuff. So what does it mean that Jesus was a culmination of the law?
What I would really...
That might not be the exact wording, or...
I like Paul's image of describing it as a steward, a tutor, someone who it was meant to point you to a particular place, take you to a particular place. Culmination, like, to me, that almost kind of brings up maybe map imagery. It's like that the law is like an arrow pointing you this way.
Okay. And then he's at the end of it.
And that you follow that arrow to its most likely conclusion, you're going to end up at Jesus.
Okay.
And so the end result of the law is not supposed to be now you can be perfect if you do everything that was just written. That is not where the law heads. And if that's where you think it's heading, you've misread the map.
Yeah.
At the end of the map is
someone who can do it for you.
I'm in trouble. I need the grace and redemption and forgiveness that can only come from the glory of God forgiving me in some way or changing me in some way. I cannot become worthy of him. And so I follow that to its likely conclusion, and then I meet Jesus.
Okay.
So that is what I think it means when it says that he's the culmination of the law.
Okay. So he's not like a part of the law. He's beyond it.
No, he's the it's the end result of fully understanding why the law was given.
Okay.
We fully understand why the law was given, and you try to live it out in some way. The appropriate conclusion to that is I need Jesus.
Okay. That makes sense.
So we spent some time, again, commission, omission, disposition, talking about kind of what sin is. So really the question that we want to try to answer today, which my guess is we'll just put a toe in that pool.
Okay.
And then you'll want to ask a whole bunch of questions. And then maybe by the end of a Q&A on this, we will have had, we're wading knee deep
right.
in the pool.
Yeah.
Are we, quote, sinners? As opposed to, so you talk about this word sinner, right? You know, I'll use a different word. Abigail, are you a liar?
Yes.
Yes. What do you mean by that?
That sometimes I bend the truth or I don't.
So I'm a liar because in some point in my past, I have told a lie. So someone who has told a lie is a liar. Okay. But Abigail, are you a liar? No, I'm not.
Like I'm not continually lying.
I'm not defined by lying.
Right.
I have lied, but I'm not defined by lying. I'm not someone whose characteristic is Abigail. Someone who lies.
Right. Yeah.
Abigail lies. She is someone who lies.
Abigail Liar Boone.
That's your middle name? Abigail Liar Boone. Abigail has in the past lied
Mhm.
and will likely lie at some point in the future.
I am always capable of it.
Right. But it's not a defining characteristic
Mhm.
of who I am. And so if you say all have sinned, therefore
Mhm.
everyone is a sinner.
Mhm.
And if by that we mean everyone has committed a sin.
Mhm.
Okay. So everyone is definitely a sinner. But in the same way, is everyone a sinner? That is,
I think we get too gentle.
that is who we are. I am by my very nature. I am inclined to sin. In fact, the unusual thing is
Yeah.
when I choose not to.
Mm-hmm. That's what I think.
That's what you think?
Yeah.
Do you think that is a biblical thing, or is that just something just you feel like is kind of birthed out of your... the Bible doesn't exist. You still believe that, you think?
I think with the way that I view myself and what I have gone through, I would think yes for myself. I don't know if I would as quickly jump to that for every person, but if I view myself that way, I would think I would eventually extend that perspective to other people as well.
Mm.
That I have to try really hard to go on a good streak. That's just not how I am naturally.
Yeah, so I think the three real choices that we have are people are born good
Mm-hmm.
and are corrupted in some way by the world and or their own decisions
Mm-hmm.
and become sinners. Born innocent,
Mm-hmm.
and again, innocent people born into a very corrupt world, and so they're
Mm-hmm.
not good or bad. They're nothing. They're a blank slate. Or are we born sinners?
Right.
Right. So we'll look at a couple of these passages. I say they're controversial, but they're only controversial if you're
talking
disagree.
about this. Okay.
But you're not going to disagree, so it won't be controversial between us.
Well, I think this is kind of calling back to one of our earlier episodes with anthropology, where we were discussing you could lean one of two ways. One, you really focus on chapter 1 and 2 of Genesis, and you think like, I'm made in God's image and I'm really great and I do great things. Or you could lean on the other side of being more in the ditch of Genesis 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I lean more Genesis 3 by disposition.
Right. So, okay. Romans 5.
Okay.
Verse 12. Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man and death through sin. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Stop right there.
Sure.
So there was no sin in the world. Adam and Eve. Right?
I hate that.
Yeah, like pretending.
It's a really big apple.
It was never said it was an apple.
I know.
It's gonna be a
Pineapple.
watermelon. This watermelon didn't come from a tree.
They come from the ground.
Could have been a coconut. Imagine eat the coconut off the tree.
Ugh. Get all those like strings in your mouth.
And so sin entered the world through one man. So there was no sin in the world. One man commits a sin, and now sin is in the world. And death,
we're not talking, we're talking human.
And death through sin. Well,
Can we just say for right now we're talking humans?
we can say we're talking humans, but
we'll get into that debate later.
the culpability of the fall falls exclusively to Adam, not Eve. Even though Eve ate first.
I didn't know that.
Did we not talk about this?
No.
Surely we did. When we were talking about the fall?
That was not a key point. I promise
really?
you.
Eve ate the apple, and what happened?
Then she gave it to Adam.
Nothing happened.
Oh, and then
I've
never thought about
and then
that.
Adam ate the apple, and then both of their eyes were open.
Interesting. No, we didn't talk about that.
Really?
Skirt. Go
Wow.
back.
Put that on your Q&A.
Okay.
And in this way, death came to all people because all sinned. Past tense.
Mm-hmm.
Now that is crazy.
Don't get into your grammar words. I don't like those.
Well, he's not saying death came to all people because all will eventually sin,
Right.
or all have sinned. It's not saying that death came to me because in the same way Adam sinned, I sinned later.
Right.
It is saying that death came to me because all sinned.
The sin has already happened. Right. Mm-hmm.
back there. And so there is somehow some culpability
Mm-hmm.
that we all share in because of what Adam did, past tense.
Right.
That we're not all like, oh, we're kind of living under the consequences
Right.
of what he did.
Well, I've always kind of viewed it as it probably is not provable on a genetic level, but we're literally all a product of a fallen human, kind of like generational trauma or male pattern baldness. So
Why you
where
look
it's
at me and
like-
say male pattern
I
baldness?
didn't
Why
know, as
looked
you're
at
a
me,
man.
You looked at me, your eyes got big.
Hey,
You
no,
said male
let's
pattern
all
baldness.
acknowledge Charlie still has a full head of hair.
Charlie does not have a full head of hair.
Basically. Anyways, it's like you can't. Okay. I'll put a smiley face on that in the edit.
I appreciate it.
But it's like inescapable because it is passed down. It's not like we're not related to Adam. So it seems crazy to me to think that it wouldn't be passed down.
But the interesting thing about that verse is really it seems to be saying more than passed down.
That's just already taken place.
Like we were all collectively deemed to be
Lawless.
sinners.
Yeah.
In that moment, like we all sinned.
Mm-hmm.
We all sinned.
Yeah.
Not just him.
Well, it's actually, that's the next part of the verse. What I was about to say.
What were you about to say?
That it would be incorrect to think that the sins that have happened past the cross have not been covered. Because he died once for sin.
Yeah, he died once for all.
Not he'll come back in a couple of years to take care of what is built up since the crucifixion.
Right. Correct.
And so it seems the same to me of it being past tense, that like it was taken care of in that moment, sin committed in that moment.
Yeah, so nevertheless, verse 14, nevertheless, death reigned from the time of Adam to the time of Moses, even over those who did not sin by breaking a command,
Right.
as did Adam, who is a pattern of the one to come. And so it's not about you specifically breaking some very specific command from God, because there really weren't a whole lot of commands out there in the wide world between Adam
And
and
Moses.
Moses. But even still, death came to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
If death is a consequence of sin, then everyone should have been born with an immortal body.
Right.
And then their sin gives them a mortal body.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone was born in this pattern, again, because, back to verse 12, because all sinned.
Mm-hmm.
Past tense. Verse 17, for if by the trespass of the one man death reigned through that one man, how much more will those who receive God's abundant provision of grace and of the gift of righteousness reign in life through the one man, Jesus Christ? Consequently, just as one trespass resulted in condemnation for all people, so also one righteous act resulted in justification in life for all people.
Paul is a crazy writer.
Yeah. When he's on point, when he's focused, this is pretty impressive.
But like he wasn't like a big educated writer. Like
Yes,
that wasn't his trade.
He's highly educated.
Highly educated, but it wasn't like he was an author for his profession.
I don't know that there was such a thing.
As a writer.
Professional writer circa
He's just so impressive at the way that he
30 AD.
writes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there is something that happened when Adam sinned that passed judgment down to everyone.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't just simply that happened to Adam and now the world is corrupted and now everybody else is kind of judged simply on their own merit.
Right.
If we were being judged simply on our own merit,
We would still
all have
be-
sinned and fall short of the glory
Right.
of God. I mean, that is
Yeah.
a very active. That's not talking about sin nature. What Adam did. It's talking about what you do. Everyone has committed a sin. And Paul's talking about, even if it's not a sin that's like breaking some very specific law that's given by
Right.
God, it's still out there. But everyone has been found guilty because of this. And so there's a handful of theories and ideas out there in the world One, and we'll just kind of talk about them. One is probably the most common one, which is referred to as inherited sin.
Okay.
So Adam sinned, and because he sinned, death is now in the world, and what he is, which is now a sinner, is now being passed down.
Right.
And so his it's almost like it's in the DNA now.
Yeah.
You pass your nature on to your kids. And so a child is born with the same nature that Adam has, which is a sin nature. So it's a heritable trait. So I inherited my sin nature from Adam, which people who like to talk about stuff like this, which I guess we do.
We're doing a podcast.
We're doing a podcast on it, so I guess I can't say anything. That is one of the reasons behind the virgin birth.
Okay, say more.
Because the sin nature is passed down from dad.
Oh, okay.
This is, if you will excuse me, referred to as the seminal view of inherited sin.
Seminal, as in like there's...
As in semen.
Okay.
As in semen,
okay.
Yes.
But it's the lack of.
Right, and so then Jesus then was not conceived that way, and so was spared having a corrupted sin nature passed down to him from his dad.
That feels like a slippery slope.
In what sense?
Mary's sinful.
Yeah, but that's not how it's passed.
Okay.
I'm not advocating for it. I'm just putting it out there into the wide world because you need more fodder for Q&As.
Sure. Okay. I've never heard that theory.
Well, and
or
so,
belief, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, but so then someone else who's like, okay, that's just too much, would say that it is passed down genetically through both parents, and then one of the miracles of the virgin birth was God overriding that.
Yeah.
And so
it just seems like God doesn't need help to make God a miraculous man, or Jesus a miraculous man.
He doesn't need help, but if he's going to do a miracle, it is going to be a miracle. What is the nature of that miracle?
Okay, yeah.
Jesus could have fed 5,000 people. He could have just gave them all a small bit of bread, and they ate it, and it was enough to make them full. Or he could have broken it up and
multiplied it,
in almost a seemingly infinite volume of bread from a small amount of bread.
Yeah.
So they were eating and getting full on a normal amount of bread. That's one way to do the miracle, but you could do it in the same miracle by just giving them a small amount of bread, or he could have just gone and made them all full right then without eating anything.
They all plump up. As a kid, whenever I first really understood the Christmas story, I was like, I didn't know that was an option. I want to do that way. I'll just have the next Immaculate Conception. I picked that.
You thought you could choose into
that one.
Choose into it?
I'm like, I haven't heard all the other stories, but surely there's other women out there that an angel just told them they were pregnant all of a sudden.
Goodness. That's another podcast series. Abigail as a kid.
My theology as a kid.
Theology of
I also thought
the historical theology of Abigail Boone growing up.
Well, I also thought it was crazy that this guy died like 6 months later. That just never made sense to me. I was like, yeah, let's celebrate this insanely short life.
It's amazing. Well done, Abigail.
Okay, so what are the other takes?
There's also a thing called so then it didn't have to necessarily. So then God just overrode the sin nature into Jesus.
Okay.
I guess you could also say, and some people have said this, that really, like an instead of like, was Jesus mixed with Mary's DNA, right? Was this just like a supernatural baby placed inside of her?
Right.
Or is it a mix of, did Jesus look like Mary?
Surely.
Okay, yeah. So that's an answer. So then so then God would have had to overridden
Right.
the corruption, the sin nature in her, because Jesus was
Right.
born with the sin nature.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the idea of imputed sin,
Mm-hmm.
which means it's not that the sin nature is passed down generationally,
But
going back to Romans 5:12, all, death spread to all because all sinned, past tense, referring to that one moment, that when Adam sinned, every person who ever would exist sinned in that moment, either because Adam was our representative. He was just kind of, hey, you represent all of us. If you pass this test, we all pass it. If you fail it, we all fail it. And so we all failed. It's not that we are experiencing generational trauma from it.
It's like just representative trauma.
He was representative. He was
Right.
He was our representative. Right.
I've never heard it, but I've heard of imputed righteousness.
Same basic idea.
Okay.
Right. And so you take something, a state that belongs to one person, and you just immediately grant everyone with it, because that one person represents the whole.
Yeah.
So Jesus' death
was imputed,
and the righteousness that he has was then, that status is given to everyone who believes.
Yeah.
It's not that you have to also do something like that. There's something that you have to do. Jesus was righteous. He died for you. And so the status that he has, he now, because you believe, you get his status because he represents all of us. And so it's not like, oh, I was terrible, but now I'm not terrible because Jesus did this thing. Like, no, I have the same, I don't have some secondary status. Jesus did me a solid. Like I have his, I have his status.
Yeah.
Because it was directly given to me what he has. So the same sort of thing here. And then again, because people like to overthink these sorts of things. There's this part where in Hebrews where the author is talking about the need to tithe and how important it is for everyone. And it says that even Levi, who even Levi, who is kind of the Levites were considered the priests and they didn't have to tithe. Tithes went to them. It says even Levi tithed because he was in Abraham when Abraham tithed to Melchizedek.
Okay.
But Levi is his great grandson.
I gotcha. Okay.
And saying he was there. Levi was there.
It is true though.
Physically in his,
I know.
In his this is testicles thing, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about, right? He was physically present there, and so therefore he kind of it is like he tithe. It is he did tithe because he was physically there, and so in that same sort of way, we were all there. We were all there in that moment, and therefore all deemed guilty at that time.
Right.
Does that make sense? And so some people will choose one or both of those, one over the other. Some will say that both are true and that it's like there's just three different ways that we get judged. We get handed a corrupt. We were judged guilty then. We were handed a corrupt nature, and we do bad things. So this in all three of these different ways we're sinners. Some people's like those first two, inherited and imputed, those are just different clever ways of saying describing that Adam's sin counts for everybody. And it does, and some theologians feel the need to really make a distinction between those two. Right. That just to kind of emphasize all of the different ways we are sinners. We were already found guilty. We've been handed corruption, and then we choose to follow the corruption.
Mm-hmm.
And so the distinction between imputed and inherited sin, that's not a universal idea, but it's at least worth throwing out there in the podcast.
Okay. But all three of those views are on the side of we do have a sin nature.
Yes.
Okay.
Ephesians 2. As for you, you were dead in your transgressions and sins, in which you used to live when you followed the ways of this world and of the ruler of the kingdom of the air, the spirit who is now at work in those who are disobedient. All of us also lived among them at one time, gratifying the cravings of our flesh and following its desires and thoughts. Like the rest, we were by nature deserving of wrath.
Yeah.
So that is very specifically talking about things that we do. We are being disobedient. We are gratifying cravings. We are following. We're doing all. It's talking very overtly about committing sin, but in the process of talking about it, says that we were by our nature deserving of wrath. And so, again, speaks to, I think, a very biblical theme of us having a corrupted nature.
Right.
And it's not just, again, it's more than just innocence. And it's more than just, we're born a click off.
Right.
Because wrath
is extreme.
You know what that word means?
We've talked about it before, but I don't remember what definition you gave.
Deserving of punishment.
Okay.
It's not cruelty. Wrath is not the same as just indiscriminate meanness. Wrath is, I guess we were
justified punishment.
I guess we were offline when we were having our death penalty discussion, weren't we? Right? It is the execution of an earned punishment.
Right.
And so by our very nature,
we
are deserving of punishment.
Which is what Romans 6:23 is describing.
Well,
right? Did I just steal your thunder?
Well, we'll talk more about that, because the people who, again, want to make the important distinctions between imputed, inherited, and committed sin, there's three real problems that you have that need three solutions.
Oh, okay.
But all three of those solutions are
Jesus?
Three different aspects of what Jesus' death on the cross did.
Right.
It accomplished this in this way, it accomplished this in this way, accomplished this in this way. And so the wages of sin is death. It feels to me that the wages of sin really speaks more to the thing that you have specifically earned for yourself. So it's probably more the sin choices that you make. But if
his wages implies,
I could very easily be turned into, no, man, Romans 6 is really just talking about capital S sin and its all aspects. Like however many of these three that you believe in, it's Romans 6:23 is talking about the umbrella that encompasses all of it. For all have sinned, big picture, and fallen short of the glory, and I'm sorry. And wages of,
yeah,
indeed.
Okay.
We're all over the map. And so we'll go to one more. This isn't a psalm, so a psalm's a little more, a psalm's going to have
abstract.
Yeah. And so it's like it's in a poem. You can't necessarily take a poem literally, but at the same time, in Psalm 51:5, David says this: "Behold, I was brought forth in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me." And we don't have any reason in that to believe that what David is referring to, that somehow
like out of wedlock or something.
He was an illegitimate son.
Right.
He's lamenting what he did with Bathsheba and Uriah the Hittite. He's lamenting all of that, and is just he's talking about what a great sinner he is, and is talking about that again, even in his very nature. Brought forth in iniquity, and sin did my mother conceive me. It's just like, again, that there is some sin that is passed on to you
Mm-hmm.
from generation to generation.
Yeah. That you can't avoid.
Do what?
That you can't avoid.
That you can't avoid.
Yeah.
And it's proven out every time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there is not anybody walking around being like, I don't know, maybe that sin nature thing isn't real. Have you
Think about that one person.
have you met Steve?
Right.
Once you talk to Steve, I'm like, no, I mean, we're all right there. Right?
Yeah.
One more. I'll give you one more. 1 Corinthians 15:22. For as in Adam all die, so also in Christ shall all be made alive.
It's pretty straightforward.
Again, just that same kind of there's a parallel, and this is kind of in that imputation. It's that parallel. It's like Jesus did this one thing, and therefore in that moment, this spreads to everyone.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like
And
Adam and Jesus are the opposites of each other.
Yeah, Jesus didn't die
Different side of the same coin.
1 billion times
Right.
for 1 billion people.
Right.
He died once for all.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't all, billions of us, all individually sin.
Right.
We
just
all sinned one time with Adam.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we have all also individually sinned. But there's a deeper theological point that Paul is making. This is more than just what you have done. This is a reflection of kind of a corruption that exists in you, but is also a legal status that has been put upon you because of what we all did when Adam sinned.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that doesn't sound great to the American
Right.
ear.
Don't put them on me. Yeah.
Right? Because we don't have a real sense of community.
We don't have group mentality at all.
Right, at all. We don't have any. We are a very individualistic society. And so we struggle with the idea that we live in how unfair it is that we live in a corrupt world.
Right.
That's not fair. Why should I have to deal with the consequences of living in a corrupt world when I didn't eat from that tree?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't do any of the things that happened before me. I should be held only responsible for what I have done.
Yeah.
And anything that happens to me that is bad, not based on something bad I did, is necessarily unjust.
Yeah.
And the Bible is very, very collective community mindset, especially around culpability, but is also very we oriented when it comes to experiencing redemption from Jesus. Right. And so I think there is, in order for us to really understand it, we have to adjust our mindset a little bit.
Yeah. Get out of the individual.
And so this has a lot of implications, both some good and some really difficult. And my guess is all of these things will come out more in the Q&A. Mm-hmm. But as far as being able to, well, Charlie, can you make the case for not us having a
original sin?
No.
That whenever people have said that, and this is not me having this formed argument that you have said, but I've just seen it in the Bible, and I'm like, well, it's just refuted in the Bible. Like it says very plainly, like that last verse that you read, like that's just really simple and kind of shuts down that.
I mean, it does say other things about sin. It says we are sinners by what we've done.
Yes.
Yes, it does.
Right.
But and it says this. Mm-hmm. It doesn't say anything that says there's nothing that says
it doesn't walk it back.
It doesn't walk it back anywhere. It's like, oh, you got to weigh those verses against these verses. Mm-hmm. These verses say this, and these verses say this, and they're two different things. There's never, it's like, well, no. And it's not even to the point to where it's like, sometimes the Bible says we have free will. Right, sometimes it says God chooses.
It's much cleaner than that.
Well, I mean, yeah, it says both of those things, and those things are hard to kind of work together. No,
right.
The Bible doesn't say we have a sin nature. It says we all choose sin. Mm-hmm. Like, those things, there's
yeah. It's not a Venn diagram.
Yeah. So. As I understand why it is difficult And again, we can talk more about this in the Q&A if we want, kind of why
People don't want to believe
why
that about
people
themselves.
wrestle with it. And I appreciate that. And so I don't want to be cavalier about the emotions that people feel around it and why they do.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a fairly straightforward principle, pretty much taught universally amongst people who take what Paul says seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So we spent some time. We talked about what sin is, big picture. Then we kind of talked about this sin nature, imputed sin, inherited sin idea. And we'll move from here to the consequences to sin, which will then be the very easy, naturally, no pun intended, bridge to talking about Jesus and salvation. So you ready? You ready?
I'm very ready.
Very good. So thank you. Thank you for joining us. And as always, thank you to
Love being here.
Abigail Boone
Yes.
for being here with us, and encourage you to keep listening to our systematic theology series that we're doing, and encourage you, if you're not connected to the Grove Church, to find us at thegrovechurch.org/connect. Let us know you're listening. Any way that we can help you, serve you, please let us know. And again, thank you so much for joining us.
It almost sounds like a Delilah.
Thank you for listening to the Cultivate podcast. Our hope is that you are taking steps to go deeper in your faith, that you are asking big questions and you're looking for answers. We hope that we can be a resource for you through our podcast and any other way that we can help you. You can find all our episodes anywhere that you can find podcasts, including YouTube. And again, thank you so much for joining us.